Welcome to this extra episode of Diplomacy and International Relations. It is fantastic to have you here with us today. I'm your host, and sitting across from me is our resident policy expert.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into the source material today.
Before we unravel today's subject, just a quick housekeeping note. If you value this kind of geopolitical analysis and, want to help keep the research flowing, you can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for a small monthly fee.
Which really helps us out.
It absolutely does. You'll find the link in the description. And it gives you access to a whole vault of extra discussions, just like the one you were listening to right now. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
You usually think of a medical diagnosis as this exercise in absolute precision. Like you break your arm, the X-ray produces this stark, high-contrast image of a jagged white line, and the doctor simply points to the fracture.
Right. It's very binary.
Exactly. It's clean. But when you step into the world of cultural integration, when you analyze the actual mechanics of moving a human life across international borders, that X-ray machine just kind of shatters.
Yeah, it really does.
We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, hopelessly murky.
Because the lines entirely blur between what constitutes a rigid systemic policy issue and what is simply an unwritten social code, a rule that a newly arrived worker violated without even realizing it.
Right.
So the analytical challenge in this deep dive is separating the structural from the cultural, just based purely on what the sources are telling us.
And that friction is exactly what we are examining today. We are turning our focus to Northern Europe, specifically Denmark.
A fascinating case study.
It really is. In international politics, Denmark is constantly elevated as this utopian model. We always hear about the ultimate welfare state, the paragon of economic stability, the magnet for elite global talent.
Sure, that's the standard narrative.
But we are asking a very targeted question today. What actually happens when the global workforce attempts to physically and socially integrate into this pristine system?
Well, according to the material we're looking at, Denmark is currently executing this really high-wire geopolitical balancing act.
How so?
On a macroeconomic level, the state aggressively recruits highly skilled international labor. They absolutely require foreign talent to fuel their tech sectors, advance their life sciences, and basically just sustain their broader economy.
Especially amidst an aging domestic population, right?
Exactly. But simultaneously, they maintain a deeply homogenous, inward-looking culture. It is a society engineered around immense social trust.
Which sounds great on paper.
It does. But the irony of high-trust societies is that they make social integration notoriously difficult for outsiders.
Yeah, you can be recruited by a top-tier Danish engineering firm, move your family to Copenhagen, and thrive on paper. But becoming an actual part of the Danish community is, it's a completely different puzzle.
It results in what sociologists and expats widely refer to as the expat bubble.
Right, the expat bubble. Today, we are analyzing the collision between Denmark's hyper-efficient economic strategies and the unspoken social laws that construct that bubble. And just to be clear to you, our listener, we're pulling all of this straight from the provided reports, academic studies, and expat accounts.
Yeah, we aren't taking any political sides here, whether left-wing welfare state advocates or right-wing free market critics. We're simply unpacking the ideas contained in the original source material.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to map out that collision, we have to start at the absolute foundation of the state apparatus.
Right. Before an international worker can even begin to navigate the culture or the humor or the corporate hierarchy, they first have to be recognized by the government.
And in Denmark, calling this process paperwork completely fails to capture the reality, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We are analyzing an integration process that is arguably the most fiercely digitized in the world. And it revolves entirely around one thing, the CPR number.
The civil registration system. It's a unique 10-digit identification number assigned to every resident.
Right.
And calling it an ID card feels, insufficient. Because in the Danish digital ecosystem, this number acts as the architectural key to your entire existence.
It really does. Without a CPR number, an individual is functionally excluded from participating in modern society. You cannot open a Danish bank account.
Wow.
You cannot legally receive a salary from that job you just moved across the world to take.
Yeah.
You can't even get a standard mobile phone contract.
And most critically, you're locked out of the universal healthcare system, which is arguably the primary draw for relocating to a welfare state in the first place, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The CPR number is the singular gateway to the welfare state. And for a non-EU citizen relocating to Denmark, obtaining it is an incredibly rigorous, highly vetted process.
You can't just walk in and get one.
No, not at all. An individual cannot simply arrive at a municipality building and register. It demands explicit pre-approval. You have to secure a valid work or residence permit issued by CI.
Which is the Danish Agency for International Recruitment and Integration, right?
Correct. You need that before the CPR registration can even commence.
The documentation requirements, the sources detail really highlight how seriously the state takes this initial vetting. Like, if you are bringing your family, the municipality demands original birth certificate.
Yeah, no photocopies allowed.
Right. And in cases of shared custody, the state requires written, formal, legally binding consent from the non-accompanying parent just to register the child in the system.
And once that vetting concludes and the CPR number is finally issued, the digital assimilation accelerates, like instantly.
It's fast.
Very fast. Within roughly 24 hours, new residents are required to activate
MitID.
Yeah, that's the National Digital Identity Solution. It functions as your legally binding digital signature. You use it for literally everything from accessing online banking to interacting with public services.
And MIT is inextricably paired with another foundational system, right? Digital Post.
Exactly. And this concept of digital post fundamentally alters the relationship between the citizen and the state.
How so?
Well, it's a secure, state-run electronic mailbox used by every public authority to communicate with residents.
Okay, so like an email inbox.
Sort of, but unlike a personal email inbox where you might, let promotional spam pile up or ignore a notification, residents in Denmark are legally obligated to read their digital post.
Legally obligated. That is a massive distinction.
It's huge. From a governance perspective, mandating this level of digital participation allows the Danish state to drastically reduce administrative bloat.
Right. They eliminate millions in postage, paper processing, manual data entry.
Exactly. But it introduces this really fascinating legal paradigm shift. If the tax authority issues a notice, or the healthcare system schedules an appointment, or the municipality sends critical documentation regarding maternity leave.
The state assumes you've read it.
Yes. They assume you have received, read, and understood it the very millisecond it enters your digital post inbox. Ignorance of an unread digital letter holds absolutely zero legal weight in Denmark.
I mean, I see the macroeconomic logic, but doesn't that inherently marginalize anyone who isn't perfectly fluent in the system?
Oh, without a doubt.
Think about an expat who just arrived. Their Danish is likely non-existent. They receive a highly technical legal document regarding their tax status in their digital post.
Right.
The state treats them as fully informed, but humanly, they are completely in the dark. It creates this incredibly rigid binary for immigrants. You are either fully assimilated into the state's digital nervous system, or you basically do not exist.
Yeah, that binary is very real.
It feels exactly like a technology ecosystem. Specifically, it reminds me of Apple's walled garden.
Oh, the walled garden analogy is apt, especially when you look at the frictionless nature of the data flow.
Right, because inside the Apple ecosystem, the synergy is flawless. Your phone captures health data, syncs it instantly to your watch, pushes your messages to your laptop, and anticipates your calendar events.
The devices talk to each other without your intervention.
Exactly, and the Danish state operates the exact same way. Your tax data instantly informs your healthcare access, which informs your municipal benefits.
It's seamless.
But if you lack the Apple ID, or in this case the CPR number, that incredibly sophisticated device in your hand is effectively a glass brick. It locks you out completely.
That's a great way to put it.
My concern, based on the sources, is whether this demand for instant, mandatory digital integration strips away the necessary human friction of adapting to a new country.
Well, the sources argue that it absolutely prioritizes efficiency over empathy. I mean, the state interacts with the immigrant flawlessly as a verified data point, but it completely abdicates the responsibility of the human transition.
It's an incredibly cold handshake.
It really is. However, once you possess that CPR number and cross the digital moat, you are thrust directly into a labor market governed by an economic philosophy that radically diverges from what you'd see in the U.S. or the broader European Union.
Right. Earning the digital ID is merely the admission ticket.
Yeah.
The arena you enter is defined by an economic model called Flexicurity. And I have to say, this was the most surprising revelation in the source material for me.
Really?
Yeah, because you assume a massive welfare state means ironclad, bureaucratic job security. But the reality is much more dynamic.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, flexicurity is the structural logic of the entire Danish labor market. It is a portmanteau of flexibility and security.
Flexibility and security.
Right, and it represents Denmark's premier economic diplomatic export. It functions as their empirical proof to the global market that a highly taxed, heavily unionized society can remain wildly competitive and agile. Economists visualize this model as a golden triangle.
Okay, let's analyze the mechanics of that triangle, starting with the first pillar, labor market flexibility. The sources state that Denmark features surprisingly low employment protection legislation compared to neighboring economies like Germany or France.
Much lower, yeah.
Danish employers maintain the ability to hire and fire workers with remarkable ease. They can scale their workforce up or down rapidly to respond to shifting global market demands without facing, years of litigation or prohibitive dismissal costs.
And the immediate reaction from an international professional is often shock.
I would imagine.
Right. Moving your family 4,000 miles for a position where the employer holds that level of rapid dismissal power feels like an unacceptable risk.
That sounds terrifying.
But the unions and the workforce actively support this flexibility.
Wait, why would unions support easy firing?
Because it is counterbalanced by the second pillar of the triangle, unparalleled Social Security.
Ah, okay. The safety net.
Exactly. This is the safety net that alters the entire psychological landscape of employment. Workers who proactively join an unemployment insurance fund, which is called an ACAS, are granted staggering protections.
How staggering are we talking?
If an employee is dismissed, they are entitled to receive unemployment benefits for up to 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. And for lower-paid workers, those benefits can replace up to 90% of their previous earnings.
90%. That is incredible. So when you remove the existential financial terror of losing a job, you completely change how a workforce behaves.
Precisely. And the third pillar of the triangle ensures this system doesn't breed stagnation. Because, if you're getting 90% of your pay, why go back to work?
Right.
So the state pairs those high benefits with active labor market policies. These encompass extensive mandatory retraining, continuous education, and aggressive career counseling to cycle the unemployed back into new roles quickly.
And the macroeconomic output of this golden triangle is massive labor mobility. The data indicates that roughly 25% of the private sector workforce in Denmark changes jobs every single year.
A quarter of the entire corporate landscape is in constant motion.
That's wild. Furthermore, 67% of Danish workers are union members.
Yeah, union density is huge.
Yeah. And wages are not dictated by a static government-mandated minimum wage, right? They are dynamically set through collective bargaining agreements between massive trade unions and employer associations.
The system is undeniably brilliant. But international workers have to navigate a really critical caveat here.
Which is?
The safety net is not an automatic right of residency.
Oh, really?
No. To access the vital protections of the ACAS, an expat must actively choose to join a fund, pay the monthly dues, and navigate the associated trade union memberships. The state provides the architecture, but the individual must opt in.
That is a crucial detail.
And funding this vast architecture requires extraordinary capital. Which brings us to the ultimate friction point for global talent.
Taxation.
Taxation.
The tax burden acts as a massive reality check. I mean, funding the Flexicurity triangle and the free healthcare requires one of the most comprehensive tax systems on the planet.
Oh, it's heavy.
The reports show standard progressive tax rates range from roughly 38% up to an imposing 55.9% for high-income earners.
And that's not even all of it.
Right. Every single worker also pays a mandatory 8% labor market contribution deducted directly from their gross income before standard taxes even apply.
Yeah, so a 55% tax bracket serves as a profound deterrent when you are attempting to recruit elite global talent, especially in hyper-competitive fields like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, advanced engineering.
Sure. A senior software engineer weighing an offer in Silicon Valley versus Copenhagen will calculate that tax disparity immediately.
And they might just choose California.
Exactly. So to counteract this and win the global war for talent, the Danish government utilizes a targeted diplomatic and economic weapon known as the Section 48E tax scheme.
Or simply the expat tax scheme.
Right. This mechanism fascinated me when reading the sources. The state basically acknowledges that its own welfare model prices it out of the elite labor market, so they engineer a loophole.
A very effective loophole.
Eligible international employees can legally bypass the progressive tax system entirely. Instead, they pay a flat tax rate of 32.84% for up to 7 years.
And the strategic value of Section 48E cannot be overstated. By dropping the tax burden by more than 20 percentage points, they instantly make Copenhagen a financially viable alternative to London or New York.
It levels the playing field.
It does. Furthermore, in 2026, the Danish government made a highly calculated political move. They lowered the salary threshold required to qualify for this scheme.
From what to what?
They reduced it from 78,000 DKK per month down to 65,400 DKK.
Okay, so that reduction signals a major shift in their recruitment strategy.
How so?
Well, they are no longer just headhunting C-suite executives, They are broadening the net to aggressively capture mid-level specialists. But here is the massive contradiction that international workers face, according to the expat accounts. You are lured in by the expat tax scheme. You calculate your flat 32% rate, you factor in the Flexicurity, and you feel financially secure.
Right. You think you've got it made.
Then you land in Copenhagen, and the sheer cost of living completely annihilates your financial models.
Because Denmark consistently ranks as the fourth most expensive country in Europe. The flat tax is quickly absorbed by the inescapable realities of consumer pricing and the housing market.
The financial shock is violent. The sources detail how a single person's monthly living expenses, excluding rent, easily range between 8,000 and 10,000 DKK.
Just for basic living.
Yeah. A family of 4 might require over 40,000 DKK a month just to maintain a comfortable baseline.
It's staggering.
A single loaf of bread from a local bakery runs 44 DKK. A liter of milk costs 19 DKK.
But those daily expenses pale in comparison to the crucible of securing an apartment.
Oh, the housing market. Housing in major urban centers like Copenhagen or Aarhus is fiercely competitive, but the true barrier to entry is the upfront capital required by the legal framework of Danish leases.
Yeah, the rental market is brutal for newcomers.
Rent for a standard one-bedroom apartment in central Copenhagen hovers between 14,000 and 19,900 DKK a month. And because tenant protection laws in Denmark make it exceptionally difficult for landlords to evict problem tenants, the property owners front-load their financial security to an extreme degree.
Which is legal, by the way.
It is perfectly legal and entirely standard for a landlord to demand up to 3 months' rent as a security deposit, plus an additional 3 months of prepaid rent.
Yeah. You are required to surrender 6 months of rent before you're even handed the keys.
6 months.
For a centrally located apartment, those upfront costs routinely exceed 100,000 DKK. That equates to roughly 14,000 US dollars entirely locked up in deposits.
Doesn't this border on a macroeconomic bait and switch?
Yeah.
I mean, the state promises a welfare utopia supported by a favorable flat tax, yet the barrier to basic shelter drains an expat's savings instantly. How does an international worker actually survive this initial financial assault?
It forces an immediate radical behavioral adaptation. The financial pressure essentially mandates integration into certain Danish lifestyle habits.
Like what?
For one, expats quickly abandon the concept of personal vehicles. The taxation on purchasing a car is astronomical, often exceeding 100% of the vehicle's value.
100% tax on the car itself.
Yes, and fuel is prohibitively expensive. So consequently, they embrace the cycling culture, and they do it not out of a sudden passion for environmentalism, but out of pure economic necessity.
Right.
They alter their consumer habits, bypassing premium grocers for discount supermarket chains like Netto, Aldi, and Lidl. They migrate out of the city center, seeking housing in suburban areas along the S-train lines, such as Valby or Amager.
Yeah.
The economy forcibly molds their daily behavior.
The high cost of living essentially herds them into the local rhythm.
Exactly.
You secure your CPR number, you surrender your $14,000 housing deposit, you buy a used bicycle, and you start shopping at Netto.
That's the expat initiation right there.
Yeah. And having survived the administrative and financial gauntlet, the expat actually has to show up to the office.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because this is where the macroeconomic pressures collide with the sociological realities of the Danish workplace.
The workplace environment presents a profound paradox for international professionals. It is defined by extreme egalitarianism and a fiercely protected work-life balance that defies standard corporate logic.
So the standard Danish work week is legally defined as 37 hours.
37, not 40.
And those are hard boundaries. The sources highlight the phenomenon of the 4 p.m. exodus.
The 4 p.m. exodus is real.
Offices physically empty out as employees leave to retrieve their children from daycare and begin preparing evening meals. By 5 p.m., corporate desks are completely abandoned.
And during the month of July, finding an open office is nearly impossible.
Because everyone is gone.
Yeah, the workforce takes their mandated 5 weeks of paid vacation, routinely utilizing 3 consecutive weeks right in the middle of the summer.
That rigid adherence to the 37-hour week is fundamentally tied to the macroeconomic necessity of a dual-income society, isn't it?
Yes, the Danish welfare state is incredibly expensive to maintain. It requires maximum workforce participation. To achieve this, the state provides heavily subsidized, high-quality childcare starting when a child is just 1 year old.
And the results of that policy are staggering. Danish mothers maintain a 72% workforce participation rate, towering over the OECD average of 59%.
That's a huge difference.
The literature discusses the motherhood penalty, the systemic drop in earnings and career trajectory women suffer after childbirth globally. Denmark's integration of subsidized childcare and expansive paid leave offsets that penalty by approximately 80%.
Which is a triumph of structural policy. However, while the structural benefits are clear, the interpersonal culture inside the office often deeply disorients expats.
Because of the hierarchy.
Right. The hierarchy is virtually non-existent, operating on a principle they call freedom under responsibility.
This cultural shift is massive. I mean, in a traditional corporate environment, power is visibly delineated. Executives have corner offices. Junior staff have cubicles.
Right, there's a clear map of authority.
But in Denmark, the physical layout intentionally dismantles those barriers. The CEO often sits at a standard desk in an open-plan office alongside entry-level employees. Communication is entirely on a first-name basis.
And the dress code completely rejects formality. A manager might oversee a crucial meeting wearing neat jeans and sneakers.
And the physical environment mirrors the decision-making process. Corporate direction is largely consensus-based. Employees at every level of the organization are explicitly expected to challenge ideas, voice dissenting opinions, and contribute to the strategic discourse.
Yeah, a junior analyst contradicting a senior league president is not viewed as insubordination.
Which is how it would be viewed in a lot of other countries.
Exactly. But in Denmark, it is viewed as necessary engagement.
The sources, however, warn that this egalitarianism masks what is termed invisible management.
Invisible management.
Yeah. There are absolutely still executives, and there are absolutely still final decisions being made, but the authority is never flaunted. For an expat arriving from a rigidly hierarchical business culture like Japan, Germany, or the U.S., corporate sector invisible management is deeply unsettling.
Oh, the ambiguity creates a ton of anxiety.
Ah.
When the lines of authority are erased, how do you navigate career advancement?
Right. I picture like participating in a high-stakes athletic match where there is no visible referee on the field.
That's a good analogy.
The gameplay feels casual, everyone is passing the ball, and the atmosphere seems friendly. But make no mistake, you can still receive a red card and be ejected from the match for violating an unwritten rule.
Yes, the rules are just hidden.
If your boss wears a sweater, asks about your weekend, and refuses to give you direct orders, how are you supposed to know when you are actually being evaluated?
It demands an exceptional degree of observation and emotional intelligence from the foreigner. They must map the informal networks of influence rather than relying on an organizational chart.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. But in exchange for navigating this ambiguity, the employee receives absolute autonomy. Freedom under responsibility means the employer trusts you implicitly to manage your workload. They evaluate the final output, not the process.
Which leads to a complete rejection of presenteeism.
Yes.
In New York or London, staying at your desk until 7 p.m. is a visible signal to management that you are dedicated and grinding hard. In Copenhagen, if a manager observes you consistently working past 5 p.m., they do not see dedication.
No, they don't.
They see an employee who is highly inefficient, unable to manage their time within the allotted 37 hours, and at risk of burnout.
And the method of achieving that efficiency is also highly specific. It relies heavily on informal consensus building, primarily executed through the coffee tale.
The coffee appointment.
The coffee poison.
An expat quickly learns that you do not call a formal boardroom meeting to pitch a new initiative. You approach a colleague and request a coffee tale.
It's an informal, low-stakes environment, but it comes with a strict cultural requirement.
Mandatory small talk.
Mandatory small talk. Almost universally focused on the weather, before any business can be discussed.
It softens the professional friction. It builds the interpersonal trust necessary for the consensus model to function. And that underlying trust is most vividly displayed in how Danish corporate culture handles professional failure.
Oh, this is fascinating.
The concept of the quahabager, which translates to the fuck-up cake. This is perhaps my favorite mechanism in the entire deep dive.
It's so unique.
In a standard corporate culture, if you execute a catastrophic error, say you accidentally delete a vital client database, your instinct is panic.
Sure, you hide the error, deflect the blame, or prepare for severe disciplinary action.
Right. In Denmark, the cultural protocol is to walk into the office the next morning with a case of beer or an array of pastries to publicly celebrate the mistake.
You utilize baked goods to announce your own failure to the entire department.
It's brilliant.
It is a highly sophisticated psychological tool.
Mm-hmm.
By ritualizing the admission of error, the culture entirely neutralizes the shame and stigma associated with failure. It enforces radical transparency.
Because if the team can consume cake and laugh about the deleted database, they can then dispassionately analyze the systemic flaw that allowed the deletion to occur, ensuring it is never repeated.
Precisely.
You combine the 37-hour work week, the 4 p.m. departures, the endless coffee appointments, and the cake-based celebrations of failure, and you would naturally assume the economic output would be abysmal.
Right. Sounds like a recipe for a sluggish economy.
Yet the data proves the exact opposite. Danes rank as the third most productive workforce in Europe. They consistently outproduce workers in the United States, Japan, and Australia who are working vastly longer hours.
That exceptional productivity is not a happy accident.
Yeah.
It is a systemic mandate.
How so?
As we discussed regarding flexicurity and the tax burden, the Danish state absolutely requires maximum efficiency to generate the revenue that sustains the welfare model. The state culturally and legally enforces the work-life balance to shield the workforce from systemic burnout. They demand that you are rested, psychologically secure, and highly focused during those 37 hours, so the macroeconomic engine never stalls.
It is an impeccably designed machine running on cozy efficiency. But this brings us to a severe pivot in our analysis.
The transition out of the office.
Yes. The Danish workplace functions as an egalitarian dream for the international worker. However, the sources reveal that the moment the clock strikes 4 p.m. and the expat leaves the office, that dream frequently dissolves into profound isolation.
We transition from the accessible digital and economic spheres into the impenetrable cultural fortress.
The statistical reality of this fortress is grim. Major global analyses, such as the Internation's Expat Insider Survey, consistently rank Denmark near the absolute bottom globally regarding the ease of making local friends.
The absolute bottom.
1 in 3 international workers reports experiencing severe social isolation. You have navigated the bureaucracy, you are thriving in the Flexicurity model, you are embraced at the office, and yet your personal life is a void.
This is the crux of the expat bubble. It is relatively simple to interact with Danes within structured professional environments where the rules of engagement are clear. It is an entirely different undertaking to penetrate their private, social spheres.
So why is it so hard?
To decode why social integration is so fiercely difficult, we must analyze 2 foundational sociological paradigms governing Danish life, Jante Law and Hig.
Okay, let's unpack Jante Law, or the Jante Law. This is not a piece of legislation passed by Parliament.
No, not at all.
It is a deeply ingrained, unwritten societal code of conduct. The core tenet is uncompromising. You are not to think you are anyone special. You are not smarter, better, or more important than the collective.
It is a cultural mandate for humility, modesty, and absolute sameness.
The origins of Jante Law are often traced to Axel Sandemos's 1933 novel, but sociologically it operates as an ancient mechanism of social cohesion.
Right. In a welfare state engineered entirely around equality, progressive taxation, and collective contribution, aggressive individualism or public arrogance is perceived as a direct threat to the harmony of the group.
That makes sense.
The culture dictates that no individual should accelerate ahead of the pack. Everyone must move at the exact same velocity.
I understand the cohesive value, but it operates as a ruthless mechanism for social control. It is the Scandinavian equivalent of the proverb, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down," except the hammering is administered with a polite smile and passive-aggressive silence.
Yeah, that's exactly how expats describe it.
Consider the intense psychological contradiction this creates for the expat. The Danish state, utilizing the Section 40E tax scheme, specifically headhunted you because you are elite.
Right, you're a top performer.
You are hired because your specialized skills make you stand out globally. Then you arrive, and the domestic culture implicitly forbids you from displaying the very excellence you were recruited for. How does an international worker prove their value to a new community when displaying ambition is a cultural offense?
It generates immense friction. For professionals migrating from cultures that actively reward self-promotion and individual exceptionalism, Jante Law feels incredibly oppressive.
I can imagine.
It is frequently interpreted by outsiders as an enforcement of mediocrity. However, what's fascinating here is that the sources suggest the rigid grip of the Jante Law is beginning to fracture, particularly among younger, globally connected Danes.
And this shift is perfectly captured by the electric bike analogy provided by author K. Zander Mellish.
It is a brilliant visual metaphor.
Lay it out.
Historically, the Copenhagen bike lanes were a physical manifestation of Jante Law. Everyone pedaled using their own physical exertion, naturally forming a collective pack moving at a uniform speed.
Everyone's sweating together.
Exactly. The introduction of the electric bike disrupts that visual uniformity. It allows an individual to effortlessly, almost arrogantly, speed past the struggling collective.
Right.
It represents a subtle, modern rebellion against the mandate that everyone must exert the same effort and maintain the same pace.
The electric bikes might be speeding up, but expats still crash headfirst into the second cultural behemoth, hig.
Hig is undoubtedly Denmark's most successful cultural export.
The global fascination is endless. It translates loosely to coziness, safe intimacy, and comfort. The classic imagery involves wool blankets, lit candles, and sitting around a wooden dining table with your closest friends while a storm rages outside.
It sounds perfect.
It sounds like the exact psychological comfort an expat craves when relocating to a foreign environment.
The aesthetic of Higgs is incredibly appealing, but an academic study featured in our sources reveals its dark sociological underbelly. The researchers argue that the actual practice of Hig actively operates against the integration of foreigners.
How does coziness become an exclusionary weapon?
Because the fundamental prerequisite for achieving Hig is total psychological safety. It requires a small, heavily sheltered environment populated exclusively by individuals, deeply and trust implicitly.
Okay.
In Denmark, these social circles are forged remarkably early in life, during primary school, high school, or university. These networks are fiercely loyal, but they are entirely closed to new applicants.
They're locked.
Hig is an experience engineered specifically for the inside of the bubble. The presence of an outsider, a foreigner who does not understand the microdynamics of the group, inherently disrupts the safety required for Hig to manifest.
The expat is essentially standing in the freezing rain, looking through the window at this beautifully curated, candlelit dinner party, but the door is dead-bolted from the inside.
Precisely, because Danes generally reject spontaneous socialization. The cultural norm does not support striking up a conversation with a stranger at a bus stop or bonding with the person sitting next to you at a cocktail bar.
You can't just buy someone a drink and become friends.
No. Social interactions are highly scheduled, often weeks in advance, strictly within those established trust networks.
When an expat finally does manage to breach the perimeter and interact socially, they are confronted with a sense of humor and a baseline level of societal trust that borders on the extreme.
Danish humor is tough for outsiders. It relies heavily on dark irony, sarcasm, and aggressive self-deprecation.
Like, they use it as a weapon.
They utilize satire as a social equalizer, constantly poking fun at authority and at each other. However, to an outsider who has not mastered the linguistic subtleties, this irony is frequently indistinguishable from blunt rudeness.
That's tricky.
If a Dane is actively mocking you or teasing you, it is usually a strong indicator that they have accepted you into their trust circle.
The societal trust extends far beyond sarcastic banter, though. We have to examine the strollers.
The strollers.
Nothing illustrates Danish trust more vividly than a walk down a Copenhagen sidewalk. It is standard daily practice for parents to leave their infants sleeping in baby strollers alone on the street while the parents sit inside a cafe or shop for groceries.
In the United States or the UK, abandoning an infant on a city sidewalk would result in immediate police intervention and the involvement of child protective services.
It is unfathomable in most cultures. But in Denmark, it is a deeply rooted tradition based on the medical belief that exposure to fresh air bolsters the child's immune system.
And this tradition only survives because it is supported by an exceptionally low crime rate and a society built on an implicit collective agreement.
Which is?
The assumption is absolute. No one will harm the child, and everyone on the street is passively guarding the child.
It is a beautiful manifestation of mutual trust, but the culture also utilizes that trust to execute some highly aggressive, jarring traditions.
Such as Knoldag or Cinnamon Day.
The Danes have a deep affinity for birthdays and their national flag, but the celebration takes a dark turn if you happen to be unmarried when you turn 25.
Your trusted friends will literally drag you into the public street.
Physically tie you to a lamppost or a street sign and blast you with industrial quantities of cinnamon. You are publicly humiliated and covered in spice.
It is a chaotic collision of high social trust, aggressive bonding, and dark humor that leaves expats completely bewildered.
This combination of cultural barriers forces an urgent macroeconomic question. We have established that the Danish state spends massive political capital recruiting this global talent. We have established that the unwritten rules of Jante Law and the closed circles of Hague leave 1 in 3 of these recruits feeling deeply isolated.
Right.
How does the state prevent this highly skilled workforce from burning out on the loneliness, packing up, and taking their specialized skills to a more welcoming country?
If the talent leaves, the tax revenue vanishes and the welfare state collapses.
Ex-
This raises an important question. The state must facilitate integration, but it recognizes that legislation cannot force friendship. The government cannot mandate Hig. Therefore, the Danish state employs a fascinating strategy. It relies entirely on civil society to execute the integration, utilizing 2 primary mechanisms.
Let's look at the first one.
The first is language. While you can easily navigate a Danish corporate office speaking only English, the population's English proficiency is staggering. The sources are clear. If you want to penetrate the social bubble, you must learn the language.
The state actually subsidizes free language education, known as Danske Danish, for all international residents during their first 5 years in the country.
It is a massive financial investment by the municipalities. They structure the courses into specialized tracks based on the immigrant's educational background, aiming for maximum efficiency.
However, the Danish language is a phonetic minefield.
Oh, it's notoriously difficult.
The grammar is relatively straightforward, but the pronunciation featuring deeply swallowed vowels, silent letters, and the notorious soft D is incredibly difficult for an adult learner to master.
Mastering the soft D is essentially the price of admission for understanding the underlying irony and dark humor. Even if your pronunciation is flawed, the sheer effort of struggling through a Danish sentence signals profound respect to the locals.
But language alone does not open the door. The true structural backdoor into Danish society is a concept called foreningsliv.
Association culture. This is the absolute bedrock of Danish civil society.
Denmark sustains a massive, hyper-organized culture of volunteer-run clubs, associations, and societies. The variety is staggering.
Yeah, the sources provide excellent examples of how expats utilize these networks.
There is FC International for football, the Pro Pace Choir for international singers, and clubs dedicated to kinball, which is a highly obscure sport involving an oversized ball.
There are Toastmasters chapters for public speaking, the LGBT plus HUSIT in Aarhus, and the International Dual Career Network, designed specifically to support the accompanying spouses of recruited expats.
There is a deeply organized club for every conceivable human hobby.
Foreningsliv is the key because it fundamentally bypasses the Danish aversion to spontaneous socialization. You cannot approach a Dane at a bar, but you can join a local board game association or an amateur hockey club.
In these environments, the social interaction is entirely mediated by the shared structured activity. It removes the agonizing pressure of small talk.
You build connection not through conversation, but through the consistent shared experience of participating in the club's defined purpose.
The local municipalities understand this mechanic perfectly. Organizations like International House Copenhagen and International House Odense operate as integration matchmakers.
They host massive welcome events, volunteer nights, and information bazaars.
Their primary objective is to teach expats about taxes and housing, but their secondary, crucial objective is to herd these isolated internationals directly into the arms of the local associations.
Analyzing this from a political science framework reveals a brilliant, arguably passive-aggressive diplomatic strategy by the Danish state.
Passive-aggressive diplomacy? How does joining a choir equate to passive-aggressive diplomacy?
Consider the power dynamic. The state essentially outsources the incredibly complex, messy, sociological task of integration to the volunteer clubs. They do not force the domestic population to adapt to the influx of foreigners.
Right.
Instead, by making foreningsliv the only viable path to friendship, they force the international workers to assimilate strictly on Danish terms.
You have to play their game by their rules.
Absolutely. The expat must engage through scheduled, highly egalitarian group-based activities. The ambitious, highly paid foreign specialist must subvert their individualism to the collective rules of the amateur hockey club.
It's ingenious, really.
This strategy brilliantly preserves the domestic cultural fabric. It protects the sanctity of Jante Law and Hague, while slowly, safely, and systematically absorbing foreign labor into the margins of society. It's an absolute masterclass in soft power assimilation.
So what does this all mean? It feels like the ultimate cultural citizenship test. In other countries, you might forge a friendship through charm and a spontaneous conversation over a drink.
But in Denmark, charm is irrelevant.
You must show up to the amateur hockey rink every Tuesday night, in the freezing rain, for 6 consecutive months. You must empirically prove your reliability, your consistency, and your dedication to the collective.
Only after months of demonstrating that you are a safe, predictable entity might you receive the coveted invitation to a private dinner party. You have to earn the Hig.
Earning the Hig, that encapsulates the entire expat experience. It is a slow, methodical burn of trust building that requires immense patience and resilience from the international worker.
It recontextualizes everything we have analyzed.
We have covered a massive amount of ground regarding the realities of relocating to Denmark. We started at the bureaucratic gates, examining how the CPR number, MitID, and digital post demand your absolute integration into the digital panopticon before you officially exist.
From that digital foundation, we explored the Flexicurity economic engine, where extreme employer flexibility is balanced by a 90% unemployment safety net. We examined the diplomatic weapon of the Section 48E flat tax scheme, strategically aimed at capturing global talent to fund the system.
We countered that economic promise with the brutal reality of the cost of living, the shock of handing over $14,000 just to secure an apartment lease. We analyzed the paradox of the workplace, where 37-hour weeks, flat invisible hierarchies, and celebrating failures with cake somehow produce the 3rd highest productivity rate in Europe.
Finally, we mapped the cultural fortress. We explored how the systemic requirements of Jante Law and the closed circles of Hig create profound isolation, forcing the expat to rely on the structured environments of foreningsliv to slowly earn their place in the society.
Denmark is a magnificent contradictory system. It offers an unparalleled political and economic paradise, but the toll for entering that paradise is navigating an incredibly rigid, culturally homogeneous landscape.
Which leaves us with a final, vital provocation to consider. Denmark is aggressively adjusting its policies, like dropping the tax scheme threshold in 2026 to recruit an ever-growing volume of global talent.
They fundamentally need these international professionals to sustain the welfare state as their domestic population ages.
Right. But as the sheer density of these incoming, ambitious, highly individualistic workers increases, something in the equation must yield. Will the sheer demographic weight of this new global workforce eventually fracture the impenetrable walls of Jante Law and Hig?
Can Denmark maintain its quiet, homogeneous coziness, or will the economic necessity of importing the world fundamentally and permanently alter the Danish identity?
It's the ultimate question.
It pulls us right back to the shattered X-ray machine. You cannot understand Denmark simply by pointing to the clean lines of its macroeconomic policies or its digital infrastructure. You have to wade into the incredibly messy, complex waters of its culture to understand how the society actually functions.
The mechanisms are deeply human, endlessly complicated, and absolutely fascinating to unpack.
Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis on this extra episode of Diplomacy and International Relations. If you found value in this breakdown and want to help us expand our geopolitical coverage, please take a moment to follow the podcast and rate it 5 stars on your platform of choice. It is the absolute best way to ensure this research reaches more curious minds. Until next time, keep questioning the unwritten rules.